My name is Malcolm, and I gave my entire life to my family. 20 years of sacrifice, patience, and quiet loyalty. I was the rock they leaned on, the one who never asked for anything in return. But when my son told me not to come to his graduation, and my wife said it would be less awkward if I stayed home, something inside me snapped. That was the moment I realized. Maybe they never saw me at all. So I packed a bag, booked a one-way ticket, and left without a word. What I found on the other side changed everything. I stood in the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly that my knuckles had turned bone white. The silence in the room felt suffocating, thick like smoke after a fire. My wife, Dana, sat calmly at the table, legs crossed, a cup of chamomile tea resting between her perfectly manicured fingers. She didn't look up. She didn't flinch. She simply sipped and spoke the words that would unravel everything I'd spent the last 20 years building. "It's just going to be family at Mason's graduation," she said, her voice too casual. "It'll be less awkward if you don't come." I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. My mouth was dry, and my throat constricted so tightly it felt like a steel cable was wrapped around it. My mind scrambled to process what I'd just heard, but nothing made sense. Less awkward? For who? Her? Mason? The people who didn't know that the man footing the entire bill for this degree was being politely asked not to show up? Then Mason walked in, his backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds hanging around his neck like a lazy accessory. He glanced at me briefly and shrugged, like this wasn't some seismic shift in the ground beneath us. "Yeah, Dad, it's just a ceremony. Don't take it personal." Don't take it personal? I'd been there through everything. Every stomach bug, every late-night math meltdown, every science fair and soccer game. I was the one who drove him to every early morning practice when Dana couldn't be bothered. I was the one who skipped work meetings to make sure he made it to his doctor's appointments. I was the one who stayed quiet when Dana complained about how exhausted she was from managing everything, while I worked 60-hour weeks to keep the lights on. And now? Now I was being told not to show up to the one moment I thought we were all waiting for. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, slam my fist against the fridge, or knock that stupid teacup from her hand. But I didn't. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I did what I always do. I swallowed the hurt and kept the peace. I looked at them both, standing in that kitchen that I had remodeled with my own hands, and I said the only thing I could say without falling apart. "Okay." Dana didn't even glance up from her phone, already texting someone, probably her sister, Meredith, who never liked me and had been wedging herself into our marriage for years. Mason was already halfway out the door, muttering something about meeting up with Natalie, his girlfriend. Neither of them saw the tremble in my hands as I released the counter. Neither of them saw the way my eyes burned as I turned and walked away. The house was too quiet. Always had been, if I was being honest. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind where no one noticed if you were there or not. I walked up the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last, like I was wading through cement. Our bedroom door creaked as I opened it. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting long, sharp shadows across the floor. I went to the closet, reached for the old canvas duffel bag I used to take on fishing trips with my brother, Luis. Back when things were simple. Back when I mattered. I placed it on the bed and opened it. My hands moved on autopilot. Socks, shirts, a pair of shorts, my shaving kit. I didn't even know where I was going yet. I just knew I wasn't staying here. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bag. My heart pounded like a war drum in my chest, but the rest of me felt numb. Hello. I opened my laptop, fingers hesitating for only a second before I typed one-way tickets into the search bar. A list of destinations popped up, but one image caught my eye: Santorini. White buildings, blue domes, an endless stretch of sea that looked like it could swallow every disappointment whole. I clicked book now before I could second-guess myself. One way, leaving tomorrow. My phone buzzed. Probably Ellie from work, following up on that report I hadn't finished. I didn't look. I didn't answer. I closed the laptop, zipped up the duffel, and sat back. My chest heaved as a strange sensation rushed through me. Not fear, not sadness. Relief. That night, I didn't say a word to Dana. I didn't mention the ticket. I didn't mention the bag hidden in the back of the closet. She scrolled through her phone beside me in bed, same as always, while I stared at the ceiling in silence, listening to the dull hum of the ceiling fan and the quiet unraveling of my last thread of patience. At 5 a.m., I got up. I showered, dressed, took the duffel out to the truck. No note, no goodbye. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked once in the rearview mirror. The lights inside the house were still off. No one stirred. It was like I had never lived there at all. By the time I reached the airport, I wasn't just leaving the city. I was leaving the version of myself who waited for permission to matter. I checked in, boarded the plane, and took a window seat. As the engines roared to life and the ground began to fall away beneath me, I whispered to myself, "You don't owe them anything." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The hum of the airplane engines was the only sound I clung to as the world beneath me shrank into patchwork land and sky. I kept my eyes on the window the whole flight, barely blinking, not because the view was spectacular. It wasn't, not yet, but because if I turned away, I was afraid the weight of everything I'd left behind would crash into me all at once. Dana, Mason, that damn kitchen. Their voices echoed in my mind, warped now by altitude and distance. It's just a ceremony. It'll be less awkward. Don't take it personal. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, my fist tightening around the armrest. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the ease with which they said them. Like I hadn't been the one paying the mortgage, folding laundry, fixing toilets, and shoveling snow through every New England winter for the past 20 years. Like I was just some guy who'd wandered into the house one day and overstayed his welcome. As the plane dipped towards Santorini, the sea opened up like a promise. Blue, boundless, untouched by their indifference. The moment I stepped off the plane, the air wrapped around me, warm, clean, smelling faintly of salt and sun. It wasn't just the temperature shift that struck me. It was the stillness, the kind that seeps into your skin, into your bones. The kind that makes you realize just how loud your life had been without you even noticing. The airport was small, almost charming. No blaring announcements. No chaos, just a handful of other travelers and the low murmur of languages I didn't understand. Perfect. I didn't want understanding right now. I wanted to disappear. The taxi driver didn't speak much English, and I didn't mind. I handed him the address to the villa I'd booked in a blur of impulse the night before, and we rode in silence up winding roads that cut through cliffs and whitewashed villages. The sea shimmered beside us, teasing the edge of every curve in the road. By the time we arrived, the sun was casting long gold shadows across the patio tiles. The villa was even better than the pictures, small but elegant, perched on a hill with nothing but sky and water for miles. I dropped my bag just inside the door and kicked off my shoes. The floor was cool under my feet, grounding me in a way I hadn't felt in years. I stepped out onto the patio, barefoot, and leaned against the railing. Below me, the water rolled in slow, steady waves, as if the universe itself were telling me to breathe. So I did. For the first time in a long while, I really breathed. I grabbed a cold beer from the tiny fridge, popped it open, and sank into a wooden chair with a view better than anything Dana had ever posted to her Instagram. I raised the bottle slightly, not in toast, but in farewell, to everything I'd carried, everything I'd allowed, everything I was no longer willing to accept. My phone buzzed on the table. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. I flipped it face down. When I finally glanced at the screen, there were already 12 missed calls. Dana, Mason, Meredith. A few texts too. I didn't open a single one. Instead, I pulled up the camera and snapped a photo. The sea, my feet, the beer. Simple. Peaceful. Mine. I posted it with one caption, "Silence looks good on me." No location. No hashtags. No explanations. Luis was the first to comment. "King move. Where you at?" I smiled a little, picturing him sprawled on his beat-up couch, a soda in one hand, already proud of me. Then a message popped in, "Ellie from work. Weren't you supposed to be at Mason's graduation?" I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? That my own family didn't want me there? That they cut me out, and I chose to stay cut? Dana hadn't called. Mason hadn't texted. Of course they hadn't. They expected me to chase, to smooth things over like I always did. Not this time. I took another long sip, the bitterness cutting clean through the ache in my chest. The ache of being needed only when it was convenient. Of being told to disappear, and then blamed when things fell apart. The sea whispered below, uncaring and steady, and I let its rhythm drown out their silence. That night, I unpacked slowly, tossing clothes into drawers like I might actually stay. I walked down to the market, bought bread, cheese, and a cheap bottle of wine. Back at the villa, I tore off a chunk of bread, poured a glass, and watched the sky bleed into deep orange and rose. No one told me where to sit. No one asked me to leave. No one cared if I was awkward. And for the first time in years, that felt like freedom. This wasn't running away. This was remembering who the hell I was, before I became the man who let his own family write him out of the story. I woke up on my second morning in Santorini with sunlight bleeding through the villa's white curtains, the breeze tugging gently at the fabric like it was trying to lure me outside. The air smelled of salt, stone, and something faintly floral carried in from the cliffs. For a moment, I stayed in bed, still under the weight of sleep, wondering if any of this was real. Then I remembered Dana's words. Mason's shrug. That kitchen. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, and walked barefoot across the cool tile floor. The silence in this house was different. It wasn't tense. It wasn't loaded with what no one was saying. It was calm, pure. It didn't ask anything of me. I brewed coffee and took it to the patio, sitting by the infinity pool that glimmered like a sheet of glass. My phone was still on the table from the night before, screen dark. I hadn't touched it since uploading that photo. I didn't plan to now. The coffee was strong and bitter, exactly how I liked it. I sipped it slow, watching a boat bob out on the horizon, wishing I could feel as free as it looked. My mind drifted, not to Dana or Mason this time, but to the version of myself I used to be. The man who smiled without faking it. The man who went fishing with Luis and laughed like his lungs were full of something more than exhaustion. Back home, I'd become a ghost. Present, but never seen. I'd been that way for years, and only now, hundreds of miles away, could I see it clearly. The phone buzzed once. I ignored it. Then again. 3 times in a row. A pause. Then another flurry. It lit up like a fire alarm on the table. I finally picked it up, not to respond, just to see. 25 missed calls. Texts. Voicemails. Names that felt heavier with each scroll. Dana, Mason, Meredith. Even Aunt Valerie, who only called if someone was dying or if she needed help with her printer. What the hell was going on? I didn't open a single message. I set the phone back down, face down again, and walked to the edge of the patio. The sea kept moving. Unbothered. Relentless. Let them panic. Let them wonder where I was, why I wasn't responding. This was the silence they gave me. I was just returning the favor. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning out my bag, organizing the drawers, making the villa feel more like mine. I tossed my shaving kit next to the sink, lined up my books beside the bed, and folded my shirts like I wasn't leaving anytime soon. Around noon, I wandered back down to the little market I'd visited the night before. The guy behind the counter nodded at me, friendly but not nosy, just the way I liked it. I picked up some olives, fresh bread, a small wheel of cheese, and another bottle of wine. No one asked what I was doing alone. No one whispered about why I was there without a family. Here, I was just another man buying groceries. Back at the villa, I laid out lunch on the patio and tore into the bread with my hands. No fancy plates. No, don't forget to use a napkin from Dana. Just sun, wind, and the slow, delicious return of appetite. As the afternoon wore on, I stretched out on the lounge chair, arms behind my head, and watched the clouds drift lazily across the sky. The buzzing had stopped. The calls, the messages, it all went quiet. That should have felt good. But I'll admit, it stung too. Not because I wanted them to chase me, but because part of me always hoped they'd finally realize what they lost. What I gave. That the man they told to stay home was the same one who held that damn house together like mortar. But silence. Silence meant they gave up already. Or worse, they never truly cared whether I stayed or went. By sunset, I cracked open the wine and took it back out to the patio. I watched the sky turn to fire and then to ash, the colors bleeding into the water like spilled paint. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. That night, as I sat with a half-empty glass and the sea breathing below me, I felt something strange. I wasn't angry. Not the kind of anger that makes you yell or throw things. It was deeper than that. It was the kind of anger that hardens into clarity, into resolve. For years, I thought I had to be steady so my family wouldn't fall apart. Turns out, they never really noticed whether I was holding the foundation or not. But I noticed. And now, I wasn't holding anything anymore. Not the peace. Not the guilt. Not the illusion. Just the glass in my hand, the stars above, and the quiet truth settling in my bones. I wasn't invisible. They just never looked. It was sometime afternoon on my third day in Santorini when my phone lit up again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't Dana. Not Mason. It was Luis. My brother. Of all the people in my life, Luis was the one who never asked more of me than I could give. He never judged, never lectured, just showed up with a case of beer when life got too heavy, and sat beside me in silence when I needed it most. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the answer button, then finally picked up. "Yo," he said, voice already laced with amusement. "You picked the perfect week to disappear, man. You won't believe the crap storm back here." I didn't say anything at first. I just leaned back in the patio chair, the wine from last night still lingering in my blood, the breeze soft against my neck. My heart rate didn't change. I was bracing for this. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Luis laughed, the kind of laugh that usually meant something went gloriously wrong. "Mason's graduation brunch. Total disaster." That made me sit up. "What do you mean?" He launched into it like a man enjoying a story that had nothing to do with him. "The ceremony was fine. Mason walked, got his diploma. Dana clapped too loud like always. Myra took 1,000 blurry photos. But then, I pushed. Then came the brunch. Some overpriced spot Dana picked. Linen napkins, avocado toast, the whole thing. Mason's girlfriend, Natalie, stood up right in the middle of it, in front of everyone, and dropped the hammer. I blinked. What kind of hammer? She had screenshots, bro texts, photos. Turns out Mason's been cheating for months with some girl from his econ class. Natalie read the messages out loud. People were choking on mimosas. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, trying to picture it. The plates clinking, Dana's forced smile crumbling, Mason's face going red. She threw the receipts down, called him a liar to his face, and walked out like a damn movie scene. Luis said, practically wheezing. Then, get this, Mason flips his chair. Like actually flips it. Storms out. Didn't even touch his plate. I let out a slow, low whistle. A chair. Yup. Full-on tantrum. Dana tried to smooth it over, saying, young love is complicated, or some crap, but everyone was staring. Myra cried into her napkin, saying something about family unity. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, the sea glittering in front of me. And they were looking for me, weren't they? Luis's tone shifted, turning softer. Yeah, Dana even said it. If Jackson were here, this wouldn't have happened. Like you're some damn family therapist. I didn't laugh. Not right away. Because deep down, I knew she'd say that. That's always been her move. Blame me when I'm there. Blame me when I'm not. I closed my eyes, feeling that familiar ache return. Not the sharp sting of betrayal, but the deep, grinding weariness of being expected to carry everything and still being treated like I mattered less than nothing. They pushed me out, I said quietly. Told me it was less awkward if I didn't come. And now they're mad I didn't save them from themselves. Luis was silent for a second. Then, you okay, man? I mean, really? I looked down at my hand, the one holding the phone, steady as stone. I let the silence stretch between us for a beat. Yeah, I said finally. I'm good. Better than I've been in a long time. Luis exhaled, and I could hear the relief in his voice. We talked a little longer, about his job, about his dog, about how Myra kept calling him too. But I could tell he was proud of me for not caving. When we hung up, I set the phone down and stared at it for a long time. They had made their mess. And for once, I wasn't the one left behind to sweep up the pieces. I didn't owe them my presence. I didn't owe them my forgiveness. And I sure as hell didn't owe them my silence while they tried to rewrite the story in their favor. They had written me out. Now they could live with the version of the story they created. I stood up, walked to the edge of the patio, and leaned on the railing. The waves were louder today, crashing against the rocks far below like a distant war drum. The wind whipped my shirt, but I didn't move. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't part of the chaos. I was simply watching it burn from a safe distance. The morning after Luis's call, I woke up to the sound of waves crashing harder than before, louder, more insistent, like the sea itself was trying to shake me from the last bits of sleep clinging to my bones. I opened my eyes slowly, the sunlight pouring in through the half-open shutters, and sat up in bed, the sheets warm from my body, the air cool with promise. I didn't check my phone. It was still on the table, face down, silent. Exactly how I wanted it. I knew more calls were waiting. More texts. Probably more guilt wrapped in the usual brand of manipulation Dana had perfected over the years. But not today. Today, I needed something else. I made coffee, dressed in shorts and a faded shirt, grabbed my sandals, and stepped out into the heat. The cliffs above the coastline looked sharper in the morning light, casting long, jagged shadows that cut across the winding path toward the beach I'd seen on a tourist map tucked in my nightstand. I didn't bring anything but a bottle of water and a paperback I hadn't touched in years. The trail to the shore was steep and narrow, dotted with dry shrubs and olive trees, the scent of salt and sun-baked earth hanging in the air like memory. As I neared the beach, the sand came into view, dark, volcanic, stretching in a crescent around a quiet cove. A few scattered tourists lounged on towels, but it was far from crowded. I kicked off my sandals and walked to the edge of the water. It was colder than I expected, sharp against my skin, but real, refreshing. I stood there for a moment, letting the sea nip at my ankles like an old friend reminding me I was still alive. Then I saw her. She was sitting under a striped umbrella a few yards down the beach, a notebook balanced on her knees, pen moving quickly across the page. Mid-40s, maybe, with dark hair pulled back loosely and a calmness in her posture that stood out from everyone else. She wasn't scrolling through her phone or snapping selfies. She was still, present, alone, but not lonely. I didn't mean to stare. I just couldn't help but notice her. She looked up, caught me looking, and smiled. Not a flirtatious smile, just something honest and soft, like she saw through the weight I was carrying and didn't mind it. I nodded awkwardly and turned back toward the water, thinking that was it. But a few minutes later, I heard her voice. Beautiful, isn't it? I turned. She was standing now, holding 2 plastic cups and a small bottle of wine, the red glinting like fire in the sun. Her accent was warm, rounded, French, maybe with something else mixed in. Very, I said. She tilted her head slightly. Come sit. I don't bite. There was something disarming about her. No judgment. No expectation. So I walked over and sat beneath the umbrella beside her. The sand was warm through the towel she'd laid out. She poured the wine and handed me a cup like we'd known each other for years. I'm Leah, she said. Half French, half Spanish. Writer. Drifter. Currently hiding from reality on this island. Jackson, I said. Just hiding. She laughed, and the sound was like a breeze through tall grass. Light, effortless. We didn't dive into stories right away. We passed olives back and forth, sipped wine that was too warm but somehow perfect, and talked about the sea, about books, about where we'd been before this place. I didn't tell her about Dana. Or Mason. Not at first. And she didn't ask. That's what struck me. How she let the silence breathe. She didn't try to fill it. She didn't need to fix me. She just sat beside me like that was enough. Eventually, she told me about her kids, grown and scattered across Europe. They don't need me much anymore, she said with a sad smile. So I decided to need myself instead. That line stuck with me. I told her about fishing with Luis when we were kids, about flipping the boat once and nearly drowning because we were laughing so hard we couldn't paddle straight. She laughed again, a real, belly-deep laugh, and I found myself laughing too. Really laughing. The kind that rattled something loose in my chest. We stayed on that beach until the sun dipped low and the sky turned violet. I barely noticed the time passing. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, probably them again, but I didn't check. Leah didn't ask who it was. I like that. When it got dark, she packed up her notebook and umbrella. I'm here tomorrow, she said as she stood. Same spot. If you feel like talking again. I might, I said, already knowing I would. She smiled, quick, sincere, and walked up the path, disappearing into the evening light like she belonged to it. I stayed a little longer, sitting in the dark, the waves crashing in steady rhythm behind me. I hadn't expected to feel anything out here but anger or detachment. But what I felt now was something else entirely. I'd been seen, not as a husband, not as a father, not as a disappointment or scapegoat. Just me. And damn, it felt good. I woke up the next morning with the sound of the sea brushing softly against the cliffs and the warmth of Santorini sunlight slowly creeping across the villa floor. But something was different. The clarity I'd felt on the beach with Leah lingered, like the wine she poured had settled not in my stomach, but in my chest, something warm and grounding. I sat up slowly, stretched, and walked barefoot into the kitchen to make coffee. No rush. No noise. No obligations. My phone was still where I'd left it on the table, dark and quiet. It hadn't buzzed since last night, but I knew it was waiting for me. All the words I hadn't read. All the guilt I hadn't invited. I sipped the coffee first, savoring the bitter taste. Then finally, I powered the phone on. The screen exploded to life. Missed calls, unread texts, voicemails piling up like leaves in a storm. Dana, Mason, Myra, even Ellie from work. I ignored most of them, letting the digital noise slide past me like wind. But then one voicemail caught my eye. It was from Mason. I hesitated, thumb hovering above the play button, unsure if I wanted to hear the same old excuses or something worse. Silence masked as apology. But I pressed it anyway. His voice came through soft, barely more than a whisper. Dad, I messed up. I know I did. Not just at graduation. All of it. I miss you. That was it. No explanations. No manipulations. Just 3 words. I miss you. I stood there, frozen. The steam from my coffee curled in the sunlight, and that simple, honest sentence hit me harder than any scream ever could. Not because it fixed anything, but because it cracked something I thought I'd sealed shut. Memories flooded in. Mason, 5 years old, clinging to my leg after scraping his knee. The way he used to light up when I showed up at his soccer games. The way he looked up to me before Dana's cold shoulder became the climate of our home. But still, that one voicemail didn't undo everything. It didn't erase the way they'd cut me out. It didn't fix the fact that no one stood up for me when Dana said I shouldn't come. That Mason let her say it. I set the phone down and walked outside, the air brushing cool across my skin. I leaned against the patio railing and stared out at the sea, letting his words settle, not like a storm, but like a wave gently eroding a wall I'd built too high for too long. I wasn't ready to go back. Not for Dana's accusations. Not for Mason's guilt. Not even for that fragile, I miss you. They needed to feel what it was like when I wasn't there to catch their fall. So I left the phone on the table and grabbed my shoes, deciding to hike instead of sit and stew. There was a trail I'd passed days ago, winding high above the water, and today felt like a day for climbing something real. The sun was sharp. The air was thick with salt and heat. My legs burned as I climbed, sweat soaking through my shirt, but the pain felt good. It cut through the noise in my head like glass. I passed a few tourists along the way, smiling, sunburned, oblivious. And I kept going higher. At the top, the island stretched out below me, white buildings clinging to cliffs like bones to a spine, the sea stretching out forever. I sat on a rock, panting, the view stealing whatever breath I had left. And I thought about all the quiet little ways I had been erased. Not just the graduation. Not just the it's less awkward dismissal. But the years of being overlooked. Dana forgetting my birthday. Mason asking for money, but never for time. Every moment I swallowed my frustration just to keep things smooth. Every dinner I cooked that no one said thank you for. Every weekend I rearranged for them, while they never once asked what I wanted. They hadn't broken me at the graduation. They'd been chipping away for years. This space, this silence, this separation, was just the moment I finally noticed how hollow the foundation had become. I took the long way down the cliff, letting the thoughts burn away with every step. Back at the villa, I opened a bottle of wine. One Leah had handed me yesterday, tucked into my hand like a gift she knew I'd need. I poured a glass, leaned back in my chair on the patio, and let the taste sink in. I didn't check the phone again. Whatever Dana had to say could wait. Whatever Mason was feeling, he needed to sit with it longer. They'd spent years leaning on me, expecting me to be the steady one, the fixer, the anchor. Now they could learn what it felt like to float without me. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for letting go. I felt free. I woke up on day 6 to the smell of salt in the air and the quiet creak of the villa settling into morning. My muscles ached from the hike, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. Not sharp, exactly, but calm. Like the noise had been turned down, and now I could finally hear myself think again. I brewed coffee and stepped onto the patio, barefoot, letting the warm stone press into my skin. The sea was out there, glistening under the sun, steady and endless. And for once, I didn't feel the need to check my phone right away. I just watched the water move, drank my coffee slow, and sat with my thoughts. Eventually, I turned the phone over. The screen flickered awake, full of missed calls, texts, voicemails. I scrolled past most of them without opening a thing. But one stood out, a new voicemail from Dana, left sometime late last night. I tapped play, already bracing myself. Her voice came through sharp, trying to sound calm but failing. Malcolm, if you were there, Mason wouldn't have snapped like that. We needed you, and you just left. This has gone on long enough. Click. That was it. No apology. No reflection. Just blame, same as always. I stared at the phone in my hand, my jaw tight. We needed you. Not when she was telling me not to come. Not when she dismissed me like some embarrassment. But now that everything was falling apart, now I was needed? I set the phone down hard. My hands were shaking, not with anger, but with something colder. Something final. Like whatever thread had been left between us had finally snapped. A moment later, another message came through. Mason. Dad, I'm sorry. I screwed up. Please call me. Short. Honest. I could almost hear the tremble in his voice. He sounded like the kid I used to tuck in at night, the one who used to ask me how the moon followed our car home. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. And then I dropped the phone onto the table and walked to the edge of the patio. The wind was cooler today, rustling the olive trees along the ridge, brushing past me like a whisper. I looked out over the sea and let it all wash through me. Dana's voicemail, Mason's message, the guilt that always tried to find a way back in. But something had changed. It wasn't that I didn't care. I did. God help me. I still loved that boy more than life itself. But I wasn't going to be the one who bent first anymore. I wasn't going to walk back into the same house, the same silence, the same pattern. I needed to say something. Not in anger, not in desperation, but with clarity. I walked back inside, opened the voice recorder app, and hit record. Mason, I said, my voice low and even. I heard you. I'm glad you reached out. But I'm not coming back to fix this for you. Not this time. When you're ready to talk, not as a boy who messed up, but as a man who's ready to own it, call me. I'll be there. I stopped the recording, listened to it once, then hit send. No lecture. No emotional plea. Just the truth. I powered the phone off again and placed it face down, turning back toward the sea. I poured another cup of coffee and sat down, the ceramic warm in my hands. My chest didn't feel tight anymore. My shoulders weren't heavy. I felt light, anchored, whole. That afternoon, I took a walk down to the cliffs and watched a sailboat drift slowly across the horizon. There were people laughing on the deck, their voices distant, happy. I didn't feel jealous. I didn't feel like I was missing out. I just watched and let it be. Later, I stopped by the market, picked up some bread, olives, a bottle of wine. Simple things. I carried them back to the villa and made myself a small dinner on the patio. I lit a candle. No reason. Just because I wanted to. The sun dipped low, setting the sea on fire, and I sat there in silence, eating, drinking, listening to the waves. Not once did I reach for the phone. Not once did I wonder what they were doing, what new chaos might be unfolding back home. I'd done my part. I'd spoken my truth. Now it was up to them. I wasn't going to let myself be the glue anymore, the one holding together a house that never saw me. I was no longer invisible, and I wasn't afraid of the quiet anymore. I was becoming it. On my last morning in Santorini, the sun broke through the curtains before my alarm ever had the chance. I lay there in the quiet, watching light crawl across the ceiling, tracing the edges of the villa I'd grown to love like a second skin. My bag was already half-packed, waiting near the door. I didn't feel dread. I didn't feel excitement either. What I felt was readiness. Not to return to Dana. Not to fall back into the routine they'd carved out without me. But to face whatever came next, with clear eyes and both feet planted in who I was now. I made one last cup of coffee and stepped out onto the patio. The sea shimmered in the morning light, stretching all the way to the horizon like it had since the day I arrived. For a moment, I stood there with my hand wrapped around the warm mug, letting the wind move through me. Then I turned on my phone. Dozens of unread texts. A handful of voicemails. Most of them were old now, left unanswered on purpose. But one stood out. Mason, again. A voicemail, no text attached. I played it. His voice was quieter this time. Slower. Hey, Dad. I don't know what else to say. I messed up. I shouldn't have let her talk to you like that. I shouldn't have agreed. I didn't want to fight her. But I miss you. Not just now. I think I've missed you for a long time. Please, when you're ready, can we talk? It wasn't an apology. Not entirely. But it was real. And that meant more. I sat down slowly, coffee in one hand, the phone in the other. The breeze picked up, stirring the olive leaves behind me. I didn't reply. Not yet. But the wall I'd built around my heart didn't feel so solid anymore. Not when his voice, so different from Dana's cold blame, sounded like a kid who finally realized his father wasn't made of stone. I stood, poured the rest of my coffee out over the railing, and went inside to finish packing. The villa looked different in the daylight, emptier, but still peaceful. I zipped the bag closed, checked all the drawers twice, and took one last walk through the place. This villa had seen all of me, broken, bitter, angry, and finally whole. I whispered a quiet thank you as I stepped out the door. The taxi driver waited near the path, tossing my bag into the back without a word. As we wound through the cliffs, the white houses of Santorini blurred into the background. The sea fell away behind me, but I carried its stillness with me. At the airport, I moved through the motions without much thought. Ticket, security, gate, seat. I didn't feel dread. I didn't feel fear, just certainty. When the plane took off, I closed my eyes, letting the hum of the engine smooth over the edges of what I'd left behind. The island shrank beneath me until it became nothing more than a dot. But what I'd found there, the strength, the quiet, the truth, I wasn't leaving that behind. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the house I used to call home, night had fallen. The porch was dark, no lights in the windows, no signs of life. I stepped out of the truck, bag slung over my shoulder, and unlocked the front door. The house greeted me with silence. The same couch, the same framed pictures on the wall, but the energy was different. Dana was gone. Her throw pillows, the endless candles, the little vase she insisted on keeping by the window, they were all missing. Her closet, I would later learn, had been emptied while I was away. She didn't leave a note. And honestly, I didn't expect one. I walked room to room, flipping on lights, checking corners. Mason's room was mostly untouched, but his backpack and shoes were gone. He hadn't been staying here either. The space felt hollow, but not in a way that hurt. It felt clean, like something toxic had finally aired out. I dropped my bag by the stairs, walked into the kitchen, and pulled a beer from the fridge. It hissed open in the quiet. I sat at the table and took a long sip, staring at the space where Dana used to sit with her tea and her judgments. There was no sadness, no relief either, just acceptance. The next day, I woke up to sunlight cutting through the blinds. I made coffee. I didn't check my phone. I just sat at the table and sipped it slowly, breathing in a house that, for the first time in years, felt like it was mine again. Later, I took that suit, the one I bought for Mason's graduation, and folded it into a donation box. I added the tie, the cufflinks, the polished shoes I never wore. That version of me, the man who bent over backward for people who never saw him. He didn't live here anymore. Before bed, I turned my phone on one last time. No new messages. That was okay. I wasn't waiting anymore. Whatever came next, whether Mason called again or didn't, whether Dana resurfaced or stayed gone, I'd face it as me. The man who'd gone to the edge of the world to remember he was never the problem. I blew out the candle I lit for myself on the patio. The flame flickered, then vanished. And in the dark, I felt whole. Looking back on everything, on the silence, the hurt, the distance, I've come to realize something most people spend a lifetime avoiding. Sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's strength. For years, I believed my role was to hold everyone together, to be the quiet foundation no one noticed until it cracked. But what I learned out there, in the stillness of that island, is this. If people only value you when you're fixing their chaos, they never really valued you at all. Life is too short, especially at this stage, to waste it being invisible in your own story. We all deserve peace, not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of self-respect. I don't regret leaving. I regret staying silent for so long. If there's one thing I'd tell anyone listening, especially those who've spent decades pouring into others, it's this. It's never too late to choose yourself. Not in bitterness, but in quiet clarity. You're allowed to matter. You're allowed to be seen. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do, for them and for yourself, is to step away and let the silence speak for you.